Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah here. We are holding on Samach Amid Beis. We're continuing Hilchas Pesach. We're in Siman Tov Samach Aleph, and we are on the bottom of the Shulchan Aruch here. We're in middle of Sif Gimel, right? No, actually, we didn't start Sif Gimel, so we're going to start Sif Gimel now. Says the Mechaber in Sif Gimel. Masa shenefes ache in person oisa ein chutin nimshach mimena yoitzin ba. If you have a matzah that is baked to the extent where when you break the matzah and you pull the pieces apart, you don't have chutin nimshachin, you don't have threads of dough that stretch when you break the matzah apart and you pull it apart. You don't have threads of dough that stretch apart and then snap. That is a matzah that is fully baked. That's a matzah that you could be yoitz in the mitzvah of achilas matzah with. And the point over here that the Mechaber is saying, when he says that such a matzah yoitzin ba, you could be yoitz your mitzvah with this matzah, that's because before that point in the baking process, you cannot be yoitz the mitzvah with that dough. Why? Because it's dough, it's not lechem. In order to be yoitz the mitzvah of achilas matzah, you have to eat matzah. It has to be something that's a lechem. It has to be considered a baked product. It has to be bread. When you have matzah that's not baked to that extent, if it still has chutin nimshachin, so then it's still butzik. It's still dough. You can't be yoitza the mitzvah of achilas matzah by eating dough. Of course, there's another problem, which is if it's not baked to the extent of chutin nimshachin, then it's still dough, and the chimutz process can continue, and this dough can become chametz because it's dough. It's not baked. But what the Mechaber is focusing on over here, he's telling you if you want to be yoitza the mitzvah of achilas matzah, it has to be fully baked. When is it fully baked? When it's no longer chutin nimshachin. Now, the easiest way to imagine chutin nimshachin is if you think about pizza. You know, you take a bite of pizza and you have the cheese and it stretches. You got those strings of cheese. Now, it's not the same. Even by a raw matzah, if you pull the dough apart, you're not going to have chutin nimshachin like you do by a cheesy pizza. But that's just to give you something, an illustration, some way for you to imagine in your mind. That's what it means, strings pulling. But by dough also, if you have it's very doughy, it's wet and doughy, so you'll have strings. It won't break cleanly. You want the matzah to be baked to the extent where it breaks cleanly. Says the Mishnah Berurah in Ice Cotton Yud Gimel. Ein chutin nimshachim. If it's baked to the extent where you do not have threads that pull and stretch. Says the Chavetz Chaim, va'afilu im hi nefreches kishemetaltalin oisa yoitzin ba. If it's baked to the extent where it's not chutin nimshachim, but it's still underbaked, and the sign that it's underbaked that the Chavetz Chaim gives you over here is that when you handle the matzah, it breaks apart. What does that mean? You see, when you have a dough, when you have a raw matzah, it's dough and it's held together. It's one uniform piece of dough. If you wanted to pull it apart, it would stretch. It's moist. It would stretch. Once the baking process begins, the moisture bakes out, and now it starts to become brittle. If you handle the matzah that has already started to be baked, if it's not well baked, it's not moist enough to hold together yet because it's raw, but it's also not firm enough. It's not baked to the extent where it has become firm. So what happens is it's brittle and it will easily break. Therefore, the Chavetz Chaim says over here, when the Mechaber tells you that if it's baked to the extent of ein chutin nimshachim, you could already be yoitza the mitzvah, says the Chavetz Chaim, that's true. Afilu im hi nefreches kishemetaltalin oisa. Even if it's not fully baked and it's not firm yet, and it's brittle and it breaks apart easy, if it's not chutin nimshachim, it's already baked enough that you yoitza the mitzvah. Now we're going to speak a little bit more about how we know if the baking process is advanced enough or not. We're going to continue discussing this. So if you have questions in your mind, let's go weiter. Kasav Chek Yaakov, the Chek Yaakov writes, Dem yesh l'sapek I chutin nimshachim mimena. Let's say you're looking at this matzah and you're not sure. You break the matzah and you do see little strings. And you're not sure. Is this called chut nimshachim? Is this called that there are still strings stretching over here and maybe it's not baked enough? Or maybe not. Maybe this is a matzah that is already baked enough. If you're not sure. V'toichev etzba toich hamatzah. So you take your finger and you poke your finger into the matzah. Ve'enoi nidbak ba isa. And when you pull your finger out from the matzah, you don't have any dough. It's like, how do you check a cake? When you want to check a cake in the oven and see if it's well baked enough, you take a toothpick, you stick it in, you pull the toothpick out, and you take a look. If the cake is still very moist, it's underdone. So then when the toothpick comes out, it's going to be gooey. It's going to have stuff stuck to it. So too by the matzah. You looked at this matzah, you're not sure. Is this chut nimshachim? Is it not chut nimshachim? Says the Chavetz Chaim, he brings down from the Chok Yaakov, if you stick your finger into the matzah and you pull it out and you don't have any dough stuck, yesh lahatira. You could be matir that matzah. That's enough of that's also a sign that it's baked enough. Because if your finger comes out clean, that's a sign that this matzah is no longer chut nimshachin. It's baked beyond that point. But the Chavetz Chaim points out the cholze im hamatzah chama. This test of chut nimshachin and this test of sticking your finger into the matzah is only efficacious while the matzah is hot. Avalim nitztanana. Once the matzah already cooled down, so now none of this applies. Efshedein raya mizeh. Now there might not be a raya. If you have the raw cake and you stick in the toothpick, you also might not get anything gooey because it cooled down and solidified. So too by the matzah, could be it's not baked enough, but once it cools off, it firms up from the coolness, and you're not going to get dough. You only get dough stuck to your finger when it's warm and it's moist. Once it's cooled off, you're not going to have that anymore. And indeed, nice cut in your dalid, the Chavetz Chaim says, mimena, the Mechaber said, if it's ein chutin nimshachim mimena, if you don't have strings pulling away from it, the Siman zeh einoi kiyim bizman shahamatzah adayin cham, v'loi bizman shenitztanana. This siman is only a worthwhile siman while the matzah is hot. And indeed, I once had a very long discussion in a matzah bakery with a noted Pesach who called me up to discuss matzahs, and he asked me to come down to the bakery where he was baking, and he was very makbid. He stood by the oven to check the matzahs for doneness. He wouldn't check every single matzah, but he checked the matzah sporadically at the oven to check for doneness, because he said, how am I going to check once I'm away from the oven? Once the matzah had 20 minutes to cool off, now how am I going to check? Chut nimshachim is already not a valid siman anymore once the matzah cooled. Now we're going to see that we don't have to go by the measuring stick of chut nimshachim, because we're about to see that we have a different measuring stick that we can use as well, which works even once the matzah is cooled down. Ois cotton tezvav, the Mechaber said, once it's baked to the extent that ein chut nimshachim imena yoitzin ba. You could be yoitza the mitzvah of achilas matzah with that matzah, because that's a matzah that's already considered to be fully baked, and it's considered lechem, as opposed to before that it's batek, it's dough. Yoitzin ba, says the Chavetz Chaim, yedei chayvas matzah. You could be yoitza the mitzvah of achilas matzah with this product. Va'afilu imhu oichla achas man meruba. Even if you eat it much later, you baked it, now you're eating it a month later. You see here the Chavetz Chaim is making another very critical point. The focus of the Mechaber was, you want to know if you could be yoitza the mitzvah of achilas matzah with this matzah. In order to be yoitza the mitzvah, it has to be lechem, it has to be baked. So how do you know if it's baked when it's hot, not chut nimshachin? Now the Chavetz Chaim makes the other point, and that is that also baked to the extent where it's not chut nimshachim, we don't have to worry that it's capable of becoming chametz. Once you bake it to the degree where it's no longer chut nimshachim, where the matzah breaks cleanly, then even if it's not what you would consider to be fully baked, it's baked to the extent where it can no longer become chametz. So now you have no problem holding on to this matzah for a month and eating this matzah a month later. You don't have to worry that it became chametz in the meantime. However, v'kaidim shir hazeh, before the shear of chutin nimshachim, if it's not baked to that degree, adayin eineno b'chalal lechem rak batek. Now you can't be yaitz in the mitzvah because it's dough, and not only can't you be yaitz in the mitzvah because it's dough, but you also have to worry that it'll become chametz. Now continues the Mishnah. And this is something that I think many of us are familiar with. A different measuring stick, a different of how baked the matzah is. Says the Chavetz Chaim, "V'yesh siman lepas shehigia l'chlal lechem." There's another siman. There's another sign whereby you could know if the matzah is baked to the degree where it's not considered pas, where it's not considered bread, and you could be yaitz in the mitzvah, and also where you don't have to worry about it becoming chametz. V'hu kisha'anu royan shenikrumu paneha. And that's what we call karmu panav, shenikrumu paneha, which I think most people define that as crust. A lot of people think that it means when the matzah turned brown, but nikrumu, the lashon of karmu paneha, does not denote a color. It's really denoting a texture more than it's denoting a color. Shenikrumu paneha, krum shalbeya, the shell, the skin. Karmu paneha is when the surface of the matzah has already baked to the degree where it forms like a skin or like a light crust. I don't like using the word crust because the implication of crust, people think of crust and they think right away hard. They think of the crust of a piece of rye bread. The inside of the bread is soft, the outside of the bread is hard. Over here, we're not necessarily talking about hard. It might not be hard, but it firmed up. It formed a skin. And I could tell you that you could actually see this happen in the oven. I know by us in the matzah bakery, it takes between 4 bake a matzah. I mean, bake a matzah fully. We're ready to take it out, where we consider it to be a fully baked matzah, is be'erich 45 seconds from when it goes into the oven to when it comes out of the oven. Now, that's, you're talking about an approximately 1100 degree oven. I would say that next fraction of a second. The matzah goes into the oven, it's laid down on the floor of the oven, and it's one color, and it has one look, and you watch that matzah, and at about the 11 or 12 second mark, there is suddenly a very distinct change to the surface of the matzah. And it's not just a color change, it's a change in appearance, and you could see how suddenly the surface just firmed. And that is what I would define, what I would call, I think, karmu paneha, where it firms over. Now, I'd like to read, because I think it's very nicely done here, in the Dirshu footnote number 33. It's very interesting. He says here, those of you who have the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, it's right over here. It's footnote number 33. V'shir krimas panim. The shear of krimas panim. What is the shear of karmu paneha? Kasa b'shalos tshuva shevet halevi. So Rav Vosner, Zeretzak Levracha, writes in his shalos tshuva shevet halevi, shehu eino krimas panim gemura shehi siman al gemar ha'afia. It's not the real crusting over of the outside that shows when the matzah is fully baked. Eladai b'krimas panim pechusa. We're talking about a lesser degree of krimas panim. We're talking about a lesser degree of the surface matzah firming up. Shehi siman al kach shahamatzah higia l'shlish chatzi afiyasa. And that is a sign that the matzah has reached somewhere between a third and a half of its baking. Now, if you notice, I told you that our matzahs take about 40 to 45 seconds in the oven, and I told you that we see karmu paneha at about the 12-second mark. Now, 12 seconds is not a third of 45 seconds. It's less than that. However, the last several seconds that we leave the matzah in the oven, I would say even the last 8 to 10 seconds that we leave the matzah in the oven really doesn't have to be there anymore. At that point, the matzah is definitely fully baked. We're leaving it in a little bit longer That's quality control. That's the way people like the taste. That's the way people like the matzah to look. But it's fully baked even before that. So it is very possible that the 12-second mark fulfills what Rav Vosner is writing here, that is approximately the third of the baking time. Now, what's significant about a third of something's baking time? Says here, V'hu ke'ein hashir shal Michael ben Drusai bebishul. We're all familiar with Hilchos Shabbos. When we talk about something being cooked, when we have to decide is something considered a cooked food or not in the context of Hilchos Shabbos, we always refer to Michael ben Drusai. Ben Drusai was a bandit, and he never was able to stay too long in one place. He was a fugitive from the law. He was on the lam. So he always had to get up and run. He didn't have time to sit in one place and wait for his food to get well done. So he cooked his food very rare. He cooked his food to 1/3 of what the typical person would cook it. So Michael ben Drusai is a third of something's full cooking time. So too over here, since we're saying that in the context of Hilchos Shabbos, something is considered cooked when it's Michael ben Drusai, when it reaches a third of its cooking time. So too, when in the context of matzah, when we're trying to discuss is a matzah baked or not, once it reaches a third of its baking time, says Rav Vosner, at that point we already consider it fully baked. Ukemavor b'taisvis and menachas. V'kevan shehigano l'shlish oichatzi afiyasa. Once it reaches either a third or a half of its baking time, nechsheves hi la'afuya, it's considered baked. Ve'ena machmetzets, and it can no longer become chametz. I'm going to skip a few lines here, and now I'm going to the next paragraph. Umatzah shekarmu paneha. When you look at a matzah that is karmu paneha, when it has reached that point where the outside is firmed, or you broke it and you see that it breaks cleanly. But it's a soft matzah. And I can tell you that we have this in the matzah bakery very, very frequently. Matzahs come up from the oven, and we're checking the matzahs, and you feel a matzah. It's definitely karmu paneha. It's way beyond karmu paneha. It's also not chutin nimshachim. You break it, and it's not chutin nimshachim. And by the way, when you break a matzah and you need a magnifying glass to see these tiny little threads, that's not called karmu paneha. Karmu paneha means you pull it apart and there's noticeable strings that pull apart over there. So these matzahs that come up from the oven and they feel soft in the hand and they're a little bendable. They don't snap when you bend it. It's got flex to it. So it's, we're up there in the checking room and we're checking the matzahs, and somebody will start saying, oh, soft matzahs. Tell them downstairs we're getting soft matzahs. We don't want to see soft matzahs. We want to make sure that they're all the way baked through. Das ha-Chazon Ish. The Chazon Ish's opinion is shekevon shahalacha psukehi, since it is a very clear halacha that we just learned here. Shekrimas panim ein chutin nimshachim heim simanim alafias matzah, that these two measurements, that the matzah breaks cleanly or that the matzah is karmu paneha, since we have a halacha psuke here, that those are very clear indicators that the matzah is considered baked. Ein lachush shema rakoisahu siman lekach shahamatzah leine efasa. You do not have to worry that the matzah is soft is a sign, is an indicator that the matzah is not well baked. Afim he nearest ksas kibotzek, even if it looks a little bit like dough. So says the Chazon Ish, you get that soft matzah, even if it looks a little doughy. If it's karmu paneha, if it's not chutin nimshachim, you don't have to worry. That is a baked matzah. Ubefrat kishehi nireis afuya mibifnim. Certainly, if it looks like it's baked. Even if you're dealing with a bakery that has an extremely hot oven, so you have reason to worry that maybe the surface of the matzah baked well before the interior of the matzah did. You do not have to worry that there's a possibility that the exterior is karmu paneha, but it's really tricking you, because while the exterior is karmu paneha, the inside is not baked. Why? Because we say very clearly in halacha that karmu paneha means that it's baked, so I don't have to worry about it. Rav Nissim Karelitz does say that lechatchila you should be nizar. So it's been very well documented by us learning here constantly in Hilchas Pesach about chumra de pischa, all the stringencies that we follow on Pesach. We're very machmer when it comes to chametz and matzah. So yes, we do stay upstairs in the matzah bakery in the checking room, and we do complain about soft matzahs, and we do want them. I do go downstairs to the oven, and I do ask the bakers to change the temperature of the oven and to do whatever they can to make sure that the matzah should not be soft. Aber halacha l'maisa, we see very clearly over here, if the matzah is karmu paneh, we don't have a problem. Once the matzah is karmu paneh, that is a siman that it's baked, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. Continues the Chavetz Chaim over here. We're continuing Mishnah Berurah in Ois Katan Tezvav. We're holding, but in my Mishnah Berurah, it's the first line of the Mishnah Berurah on Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Near the end of the line, right by the Ois Chav Gimel for the Shar Tzion, says the Chavetz Chaim, I just told you now that besides the siman of Chutin Nimshachim, there's another siman of Karmu Paneha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, you should know V'hu Chad Shiura. They're one and the same. What does that mean? What he means is they're one and the same. If the matzah is Karmu Paneha, then it's not Chutin Nimshachim. They both are indicators that the matzah is well baked. Valkain, and therefore, Im Nitztanen na hamatzah. If you're dealing with the matzah that already cooled down, so now we said once the matzah is cooled down, you can't use the indicator Chutin Nimshachim, because once the matzah cools down, that's not a valid indicator anymore. Uparasa, and now you take this cooled down matzah and you break it. Berurah bareyasa mibifnim, and you see something inside the matzah shenikar shalai nefa yafa that makes you say this matzah was not well baked. But you could no longer judge by the siman that we said previously of Chutin Nimshachim because you're dealing with a matzah that was already cooled down. So what should you do? Yabit bifnei hamatzah. Look at the surface of the matzah. And if you see that this matzah was certainly karmu paneh, yesh lahatira. You could be matir this matzah even though you saw something inside that makes you think it's not well baked. Because if it's karmu paneh, it's baked. Avalim gamba hakrima gufa yesh by safek. But if you're not sure if this matzah was karmu paneh and it's already cooled down, so you can't tell if it's chutin nimshachin, you have really a very underdone matzah here, and you're really not sure if it's karmu paneh, and you can't tell if it's chutin nimshachin because it already cooled down. Then says the Chavetz Chaim, "Usafik daraisa lekama paiskim." Now, according to many paiskim, this is a safik daraisa. V'aser afilu behefsid meruba u'manias simchas yomtiv. This matzah would be usher to eat on Pesach, even if you're dealing with significant financial loss. Let's say you have a whole slew of matzah that is this way, and you're going to have to replace it all. Or you have manias simchas yomtiv, you can't eat your suda because you don't have matzah to eat. Doesn't matter. This is a safik daraisa on this matzah. You have no way to be sure that it was well baked enough, and you cannot eat it. Okay. Now let's go weiter. Now we're going to continue up in the Shulchan Aruch. We're on the bottom of Samach Amud Beis in the words of the Ramah. Haga, says the Ramah, V'yesh li zahir, you should take care, shaloi l'lakcha min hatanur, that you should not remove a matzah from the oven, kaidem lachein, before it hits the point in the baking where it's no longer karmu paneha, ula hachzira. What the Ramah is telling you here is when you're baking matzah, don't take a matzah, a raw matzah, stick it in the oven, and then pull it out in the oven before it's baked, and then stick it back in the oven. Can't do that. Says the Ramah, why? Because he brings down from the Maril here, because by doing that, you may very well accelerate the chimutz process, and it could be that this matzah will become chametz right away. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah nice cut in Tezayin. Kaidem lacheinu lahachzira. You should not pull a matzah out of the oven before it's fully baked, before it's even not fully baked, but before it's baked to the extent of karmu paneha and ein chutin nimshachim, so that halachically it's considered baked. Don't pull a matzah out from the oven before it gets baked to that extent and then put it back in. Ritzayna loymar, the Chavetz Chaim says what the Ramah wants to say here is, loymi baya litla shaloy lachzira, Certainly, you shouldn't pull this underdone matzah out of the oven with the intent to leave it out of the oven and not rebake it at all. Bevadei osir. That matzah would certainly be osir because the kevet shechutin nimshachim mimena, because since it's still underbaked, since it hasn't reached the point of ein chutin nimshachin, harehi adayin bechlal batek. So this is still dough. And not only you can't be yotze the mitzvah by eating this dough, but v'tischametz bevadai al kol panim b'shir shias mil. But also, since you pulled it out of the oven before it was baked, you're still dealing with raw dough. So you can't be yotze the mitzvah, and the chimetz process will still continue, and it'll become chametz. Certainly, it'll become chametz if you leave it out for 18 minutes for the shir mil. But not only that, there's a bigger problem. It might even become chametz faster than a sheer mill. Because remember what we've spoken about so many times. You have to be careful not to bring a raw matzah near the piataner because it's going to get warmed. You have to make sure it doesn't get warmed by the sun because we always say once the dough gets warm, it could be the chimetz process will take place even faster than a sheer mill. So you can't take a matzah, stick it in the oven, and then pull it out before it's baked. Ella, but not only should you not pull it out of the oven with the intent of leaving it out of the oven, you also can't pull it out while it's underdone with the intent to put it back in. Let's say you pulled it out because you want to show it to somebody, or you pulled it out because you want to spin it around, and now you want to put it back in. Can't do that. Because when you pull it out of the oven, now it's dough that was in the heat of the oven. Now it's no longer in the heat of the oven. Maybe it'll become chametz right away. Since it was heated up by the oven, maybe it'll become chametz immediately. We discussed this earlier in Tuf Nun Tes when we spoke about all of these issues about the dough getting warmed. You can't knead the dough in the sun because it's going to get warmed by the sun. Once you start working the dough, you can't leave it alone even for an instant because it got heated up from the friction of being worked on, and now it might become chametz. So alachas kama v'kama, you're going to stick a piece of dough in the oven and then pull it out? You can't do that. So don't pull it out before it's baked. Nevertheless, the Chavetz Chaim does say, if you did pull an underbaked matzah out of the oven and you put it back right away, ein lesser. Says b'diavad, we shouldn't answer it. Okay, now we go to Sif Dalet. Let's go back into the Shulchan Aruch Sif Dalet. Yotzei Adam b'matzah sheruya. You could be yotzei the mitzvah of achilas matzah with matzah shruya, with matzah that was soaked. And it's still, the point over here is that soaked matzah is still considered lechem. It's still considered pas. It's still considered matzah. By soaking it and softening it up, depends to what extent, but if it was just somewhat soaked, it doesn't lose the din of lechem, of pas, and you could still be yotzei the mitzvah of achilos matzah. However, turn the page to Samach Aleph Amud Beis, continues the Mechaber, V'hu shaloi nimucha. That's as long as it doesn't melt, as long as it doesn't, what's the right word I'm looking for here by matzah? As long as it doesn't fall apart. If the matzah falls apart so to the extent that it loses the tzuras hapas, it doesn't have teresa danama anymore, it doesn't look like bread, it just turns into a mush, if it's nimucha, you can't be yotzei the mitzvah with it anymore. It's not lechem anymore. Aval in bishla eina yotzeba. But cooked matzah, you cannot be yotzei with at all. Now let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Let's turn back to Samach Aleph Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah Berurah, nice cut in Yud Zayin. Yotzei Adam. Now be very careful. Let's take note of the way the Mechaber wrote this. The Mechaber wrote Yotzei Adam matzah shruya. You can be yotzei the mitzvah. Says the Chavetz Chaim in his cut in Yud Zayin, Hainu di'eved. B'di'eved, you could be yotzei the mitzvah. But this is certainly not a lechatchila. Lechatchila, we don't want you to use matzah shruya. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, Ulezakein ulechayla, if you're dealing with an elderly person or an unwell individual, shekasha loy lecho matzah yavesha, for whom it's very difficult to eat dry matzah. Some people are not well; they have a very hard time swallowing that dry matzah. Sometimes chewing up the dry matzah. Sometimes even a person who's not elderly has a problem with teeth. He's missing teeth and he can't chew up the hard matzah. So you have a zaken, an elderly person, or an unwell person who cannot eat the dry matzah. Mutar afilu lechatchila lishreis hamatzah b'mayim. Then the Chavetz Chaim says, even lechatchila you could soak the matzah. Ach tzarich lizar shelo yesharui me'es le'es. But you should make sure not to soak it for a 24-hour period. The kavush kimavushal, a concept that was spoken about many times. Something that's kavush, something that's soaked for 24 hours, that gets a din of mavushal. That's as if it's cooked. And cooked matzah, we just saw, the Mechaber says you can't be yotze with. Eis katan yud ches, shruya. So you said you could be yotze the mitzvah b'diavad, or for a zaken and a chayla lechatchila, with matzah shruya, with matzah that was soaked. Says the Chavetz Chaim in Eis katan yud ches, it was soaked b'mayim. We're talking about matzah that was soaked in water. How about soaking the matzah in apple juice, meiperos, or in marok, in soup, or in gravy? Then yesh deos bein haposkim. Then there are differences of opinions amongst the poskim. Yesh Omrim, there are those that say, he brings this down here from the Magen Avram, Yesh Omrim, the Asr, that to soak the matzah in other liquids is Asr, and you cannot be yotze the mitzvah. Why? Lefi shehein mefigin es tam hamatzah, because it weakens the tam of the matzah. If you soak matzah in apple juice, the taste of the matzah is weakened, shenoistin ba tam shelohen, because it's replaced by the taste of the apple juice. The taste of the apple juice is going to overpower the taste of the matzah. And here we have a very interesting yesod, and that is, it's clear from the Gemara, both the Gemara in Psachim and from the Gemara in Brachos, and from Gemara in Shabbos and Gemara in Menachos, it's clear that we need to have tam matzah. And it's a beferish Rambam. The Rambam says beferish that we have to have tam matzah. In order to be yotze the mitzvah of matzah, we have to have tam matzah. And indeed, in the Gemara, there's a maimer from Hillel. Hillel says that in order to be yotze the mitzvah daraisa of matzah, you should not take matzah and maror and eat it together, because the maror will overpower the tam of the matzah, and then you don't have tam matzah, and you can't be yotze in the mitzvah. So it's very apparent that we have to have tam matzah. Why exactly do we have to have tam matzah? It seems that if you don't have the taste of the matzah, then it's as if the matzah itself is bottled. A very significant feature of matzah is its taste of food, right? One of the most significant features of food is its taste. If the taste is not here, then to a certain extent the food is bottled. The food is not here. Now we're going to see a halacha later on, where the Mishnah Berurah is going to say that you could be yotze the mitzvah of achilas matzah by just swallowing matzah without ever chewing it up. So you take a piece of matzah. Imagine if you could, you take a piece of matzah, you just put it in your mouth and gulp it down. You just swallow it. You never had the taste. You never chewed it up. You never experienced the taste. Yet you can be yotze in the mitzvah. But the difference is that over there, we're not dealing with matzah that did not have taste. That matzah had taste. Just you didn't taste it because you swallowed it whole. Over here, we're talking about matzah that does not have taste. You soaked it in apple juice, and the taste of the matzah was overpowered by the taste of the apple juice. So now that's a matzah that doesn't have tam. If the matzah doesn't have tam, then to some extent the matzah is not here, and then you can't be yotze the mitzvah of matzah. So therefore, says the Chavetz Chaim, we have over here one opinion that says that you can only be yotze b'diavad with matzah that was soaked in water, because the water does not replace or overpower the tam of the matzah. But if it was on other liquids that have taste, then you can't be yotze even b'diavad. So continues the Chavetz Chaim, and the Chavetz Chaim says, Yesh Omrim the also lefi shein mefigin is tam hamatzah shenoistem batam shalem. The Yesh Omrim, but there are other opinions. There are keach that's brought by the Beis Yosef. There are other opinions that say Dafka al yidei bishul mefig tam matzah v'loy al yidei shriya. That the Gemara says that by bishul, that when you cook the matzah, it's a problem because the tam of the matzah gets lost. That's only that's only cooking the matzah in other liquids has the effect to take away the tam, but soaking it does not. So according to these opinions, you could even soak the matzah in other liquids other than water, as long as you don't cook it. So the Chavetz Chaim says, "V'alkein therefore, zaken or an elderly person or an ill person, who for some reason cannot, not only can he not eat the dry matzah, but he can't even eat matzah that was soaked in water. Mashkin, he would be allowed to soak his matzah in wine or in other liquids. Aval shar kol adam, but other people, she'achal matzah hashriya b'shar mashkin chutz mimayim, other people who would want to eat soaked matzah that was soaked in other liquids other than water, lo yotzer yidei chevasei, they're not yotzer. V'tzarich lazer v'leko matzah acheres ben hakazayis shel brichas matzah ben hakazayis shel afikoyim. So he's saying, sick or elderly people who have no choice, they need to soak their matzah in other liquids other than water, but they could do it. But a person who could eat matzah that was soaked in mayim, or he could, if he doesn't have to eat this, and he eats matzah that was soaked in other liquids, he's not yotze the mitzvah, even b'di'evet, to the extent that if he did this, he has to eat matzah over again. Continues the Chavetz Chaim on the bottom line in his ches v'chol zeh dafka kishisharis hamatzah behen. This is only talking about where we're soaking matzah. Aval lahatbil oisa behen. How about to dip matzah? We're not talking about soaking the matzah. We're just going to take a piece of matzah very quickly and dip it in something. Kasa Rabbeinu Manayach b'pshitas deshari. Rabbeinu Noach says that it's a davar pashut, that's mutter. The bazer loin is batal tam matzah, because by doing that you're not losing the taste of the matzah. And just an instant dip into a liquid is not going to replace the tam of the matzah. V'da'oid, and furthermore, you should know this that we're makel, that we rule leniently when it comes to matzah that's soaked in water. Dafka kisheshayra kizayis shalem biyachad. This kula is only when you take a big piece of matzah. You take a kazayas of matzah and you soak a kazayas whole. That's when we say that b'di'evid you could be yotze the mitzvah by eating a piece of soaked matzah. Avalim yishra prusais mikazayas. But if you're going to break up the matzah into pieces, and each piece is smaller than a kazayas, and you want to soak it that way, then you can't be yotze the mitzvah by eating that matzah. If you soaked pieces of matzah in water to the degree where the water starts turning white, then you can't be yotze the mitzvah. Because at that point, these pieces are no longer considered lechem. Then it becomes as if it was nimuach, as if the matzah fell apart, where we say it's no longer lechem. So to over here, it would be no longer considered lechem. Kain kasev among Avram b'sim kuf samach chesev katan lam. V'ayin sham b'mishta b'risav katan samach gimel. The berarnu sham the mishara oisan zman mu'it. If you only left the pieces of matzah in the water for a short amount of time, the water did not turn white. Then even if the pieces are less than a kazayas, like avad mehem shem lechem, it's still considered lechem, and you could still be yotze the mitzvah. Ice cutting your test, the Mechaber said you could soak the matzah and be yotze the mitzvah as long as v'hu shalai nimucha, as long as the soaked matzah did not fall apart. V'hu shalai nimucha. Ayin bir halacha. Okay. Ice cut mechaf. Then the Mechaber said, but you cannot be yotze the mitzvah with cooked matzah. Bishla afilu yesh b'chol petisa kazayis. If you cooked the matzah, even if you cooked big pieces of matzah, so that each piece was a kazayis, the gam yesh adayin tara lechem aleha, and it still looks like bread, still you can't be yotze. Levisha akara bishol nispatel mimenu tam matzah, because the cooking process takes away the tam matzah. So there's no way to be yotze with cooked matzah. Because achrayim delav dafka bishla, It doesn't even mean that necessarily you have to cook it, that you put it in a pot, you boiled it up. Do adin b'shari l'sayk reiskin, even if you just soaked it a little in hot water. V'afilu b'kli even if you soaked it in hot water in a kli, and normally in Hilchos Shabbos we say kli sheni, there's no bishul. Yesh lahakmir d'loy l'shreisem loy l'tzarech. We should rule stringently, and we should not soak the matzah in hot water, even in loy l'tzarech, unless there's a great need. When we're referring here to soaking the matzah in hot water, we're talking about water that's heated to the degree of yatsa ledis by where your hand would jump back if you touched it. As far as soaking it in soup or something like that, we should be machmer. And no matter what, we should not soak it. Okay, we're going to stop over here with Sif Hey, Ms. Hashem. We'll continue tomorrow with Sif Hey. Be well. Thank you so much for joining me for this Torah learning. The Rebbeinu Shalom should be Megan, Gans Klal Yisrael. Those who need Yeshuas and Refuas, the Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshuas and Refuas. Everybody should be safe. Everybody should be well. We should be Zeicha quickly, not only to get back to our shuls and to get back to our Hamein Yeshpei Rabbas and our Ameins and to seeing our Chaverim and to seeing our family, but we should get back to the Gula Shlema. We should be Zeicha. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Mashiach. We should have the Gula Shlema. We should be Zeicha to the Beis HaMikdash. We should be Zeicha to the real Makom Kadosh. We should be Zeicha to a Beis HaMikdash in Eretz Yisrael, to the Gula Shlema. Be well.